Jacinth of Jailshead, Book 1, Bloodkin, by Kathy Ashford. Chapter 14! Okay. The beginning of autumn was bright and mild. The leaves on the trees in the quad at the academy slowly turned golden, then orange, then finally dropped, to be raked into neat little piles by a journeyman. Up on the hills, in the little gullies between the mansions of Lil's elite, the foliage was bright, as if the whole city was making an attempt at rivaling the colour of the Niathi Quarter. At the academy, we began to have our classes taught by guest lecturers from the schools of science. Mer Stewart explained human biology and evolutionary processes, spending a considerable amount of time on the workings of the human brain, how chemicals and neural transmitters created thoughts and emotions. We began to see how Hyavan could be used by a psychotherapist or psychosolace to treat mental imbalances. Mer Nicholas lectured on physics, the way everything in the world reacted with each other. Perhaps most important for us were the classes taken by Mer Edward, the head lecturer in chemistry. He explained more fully to us how atoms were made up, and how chemical reactions could be manipulated with Hyavan. These lectures were not merely theoretical. With Hyavan, we could see into objects and discover, and dissolve, these atomic bonds for ourselves. In our practical sessions in the afternoons, we began investigating what we had learned in the mornings. We began simply with one of the most basic compounds in life, water. We practiced joining together atoms of hydrogen and oxygen to create it, and then we used bowls of water to practice breaking it back into its component parts. One Tuesday, on the eve of the Temple Festival of Samhain, Fiona popped her head round the door of our classroom as we were finishing for the day. "Oh, hello everyone!" Mer Edward smiled and gestured for her to come in. Her hair was dyed a bright, fiery red. "Beetle shells," she explained to me the previous weekend when I had seen her at the Thistle. "Lovely colour, don't you think?" She was dressed in her usual human-style gown, with its full skirts and tightly nipped-in waist. I heard Selim mutter to Mantley behind me. "I've never seen a Niathi wearing a proper dress." She chuckled derisively. Quick as a flash, Fiona smiled at her willingly. "I have to admit, I've never seen a Bloodkin wearing one to class either, but I admire your perseverance. Dresses are marvellous though, aren't they, dear? I love how they make me feel so girlish, so silly." And she gave a little wiggle of her hips. Sella blushed furiously as the rest of us laughed. "It's nice seeing so many familiar faces here." Fiona gave me a tiny wink. "Now, from Thursday, I will be coming in to teach you some of what I know about moss. Of course, tomorrow's the festival, so you'll have the day off, and please feel free to enjoy yourselves. On Thursday, we will be sampling moss. We'll begin with a white, of course, but try not to be too hungover. You will not be smoking anything until you have satisfied me that you have grasped what I will be teaching you in the morning." The next day dawned bright and clear, but the breeze from the lake held a hint of autumnal chill. Dew still glistened on the grass as the whole group of us from the hall, journeymen and Min Eve included, hurried to the temple for an early service. Festival services were much longer than the usual ones held on Sundays, and the temple was packed with people, humans and Niathi alike. Samhain was the last of the big festivals before Yule, at the very end of the year. It is essentially a celebration of autumn, of the slow descent of the year into winter, and a time for remembrance. Inside the temple, a great cavernous stone edifice. The rows of pews were festooned with ribbons in the colours of the season, yellow, orange and red, tied about chrysanthemums and marigolds. The entire length of the front altar underneath the statue of Queen Lilibet was laden with offerings of seasonal produce, apples, pomegranates, pumpkins and squashes, donated by the people of Lil for the priests and priestesses to cook and serve to the poor of the city. Instead of the simple ritual of gratitude, there were two main parts to the Samhain service. After welcoming us, the high priestess, Hanyash, conducted something of a meditation, set to slow, almost mournful music piped from the organ, on loved ones who had passed away. She reminded us to honour their memories, to sit with feelings of pain and loss. We had been given pieces of paper and pencils at the door, as was usual, but now she bade us try and describe these feelings. It was a weird kind of festival, really. No one I knew had died recently, so I was feeling rather untouched by the whole thing, although weeping erupted sporadically from around the congregation. My pencil and paper still sat untouched when the music ended and Haniash spoke the traditional words of Samhain, marking the passing of the sun, like the passing of people from life into death. Then it was time for the second part of the service, and the organist began playing again, a stirring and almost violent piece. Now we were to write on the other side of the piece of paper any aspects of our lives that we wished to be free of. Anger, bad habits, misplaced feelings, disease. Again, I struggled with the words. Frankly, on the whole, I was pretty content. I guess that thoughts of Sala still bugged me. The way she had treated me still bugged me too. And perversely, I still wanted her, and this annoyed me. I thought of Charlie too, troubled by his relationship, or lack thereof, with Anna. And although it wasn't really my place, I still wish we could, let it go. So I wrote the names of the two women on my piece of paper and quickly folded it. When the second piece of music ended, the high priestess gave her blessing, ended with the traditional, "So mote it be," and the congregation stood as one to file forward slowly to the brazier waiting at the front of the temple. After I dropped my piece of paper into the flames, I turned to walk back down the aisle, and then noticed for the first time the large portrait hanging above the great double doors leading outside. Apparently Telgath had been right. Queen Thayalik was a babe. She had long blonde hair, so fair as to be almost white, a straight, regal nose and a strong, wide jaw. Although the portrait was only a copy of the Ashlar original, painted before the last elections, her slate blue eyes seemed to sparkle with some fierce intelligence, the cast of her curved lips resolute. I don't know what the other candidates looked like, but I would definitely have voted for her. I stared at the portrait, walking slowly through the temple. Too slowly, because Charlie caught up to me as I got close to the door. Outside, I could see the high priestess greeting and thanking the congregation as they left. She was a tall woman, completely bald, of course, and was swathed in the bright saffron robes edged in the red of her office. Her face was only lightly touched with lines, and she was still rather handsome, despite being, by my guess, somewhere in her late 40s. Haniash was Anna's first Bloodkin, did you know? Charlie murmured in my ear as we waited in the crowd to leave. I think I had heard mention of it once, actually, but it was still a bit surprising. It was hard to imagine the venerable priestess as ever being an 18-year-old girl, and even harder to imagine that Anna had been the same age as Charlie was now. At the front of the line, Haniash grasped my hands. "Thank you for coming, Bloodkin. Queen Lilbich would have appreciated your remembrance. Good luck with your studies. Peace be with you." I was puzzled by her use of the term Bloodkin, though as she turned to Charlie I realised how obvious it was. Charlie, yes. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Haniash. It was a beautiful service. The high priestess smiled at them, then grew serious. How fares Anna these days? I fear I have not seen her much since... She's fine, Charlie told her, then took a deep breath. She might appreciate your guidance, though, High Priestess. Haniash laughed. Me giving Anna guidance? I never thought I would see the day when student becomes mentor. But she nodded at him. Thank you. I will see what I can do. Peace be with you, boy. We gathered the others and walked through the streets until we came to the market square and the merchants' quarter and the human area of the city. Stalls had been set up everywhere, selling every kind of goods one could imagine. While the festival was a holiday for most, travelling merchants from around the countryside still took the opportunity of the festive occasion to hawk their wares to the revellers. It was still only late morning, but booths were set up to sell wines and ales to passers-by. Samok and Donnick quickly found the stall that sold their favourite Ryeholm ale and grabbed big paper cups of it for everyone. Sella and Mantilly soon wandered off with their mentors in tow, going to look at clothes or jewellery or some other girly stuff. Lalitha watched them go a little wistfully. She had been well and truly accepted as one of the boys, ever since that first afternoon at the academy when she had come to the Thistle with us after class. She and Sella had reached an uneasy truce, but I suspected that perhaps Sella envied the easy, joking relationship Lalitha had with the rest of us. But even though she was gay, it didn't mean that she was completely oblivious to feminine interests in fashion, and I'm afraid that we, her guy mates, weren't all that helpful when it came to clothes shopping. We watched as the square began to crawl with people. Jugglers and fire breathers and buskers with all sorts of weird and wonderful talents set their hats down at intersections in the market, and we wandered around, flipping coins at any that were particularly good. When we passed the stall of a cloth merchant's collective from the Jail's Head district, Lalitha paused, and in the interest of being a good friend, I stayed with her while the others moved on. Charlie elected to help me, and Talgith, although complaining about dumb girl stuff, found a wine stall seats opposite and put his feet up to wait. Lalitha hesitantly reached for a delicate seafoam green alpaca weave. I think maybe I should get a dress, she told me quietly. Why? What's wrong with robes? She gave me a look that spoke volumes about me being an idiot boy and not understanding, and she shrugged. The other girls have some, for like going out and stuff. But you're not like the other girls. No shit. She sounded cross, and I instantly regretted what I said. Luckily, Jimmy had wandered over to find us, and he came over to check out the fabric, ignoring my faux pas. Well, if it's a dress you want, it's a dress you shall have. Kaiosh, come have a look at this, will you? The two mentors studied the fabric, and I could tell from their little frowns that they were inspecting it with Yavin. Oh, yeah, this is nice. Neathi weave, I presume? Charlie asked the woman running the store, who nodded. My daughter's Neathi blood. She does all of the weaving. Jimmy smiled at her. How much will this young lady need for a dress? The woman measured out and cut a length of the cloth, which she folded and wrapped and handed it to Jimmy. With a good tailor there should be plenty there for the lass, with enough left over for a little jacket too. Jimmy thanked her and handed over some coins. It was much cheaper buying direct from the market than the cloth for sale at Mintariella's. He handed the bundle to Lalitha. There you go. We'll get you measured up on the weekend, yeah? Talgith got to his feet with an exaggerated moan and joined us as we moved down the row of stalls. We rounded a corner and he let out a cry of excitement, then rushed over to a blacksmith stall. Tamoth, what are you doing here? Dad let you out of his sight. The man behind the stall looked to be in his mid-20s, had Talgith's same orange hair but was much broader in the shoulders and had big meaty smith's hands. Everyone, this is my oldest brother Tamoth. Tamoth, this is Lalitha and Jimmy and Jasseth and Charlie. Yeah. Talgith was grinning madly as he introduced us. Dad really let you bring a wagon all the way to Little? How long are you here for? Tamoth smiled patiently at Talgith's rapid-fire questions. He sure did. He had to stay at home. He's busy with a commission for the Lord. He stopped abruptly and looked at me. Lord Jasseth? I blushed and nodded. Even though this happened to me pretty much every time I met someone, I still felt awkward as hell. Gosh, you're keeping good company these days, Geth. How goes the academy? I was going to come find you there later on if I didn't bump into you today. It's brilliant. Well, we're learning about physics and chemistry and moss and... Oh, this is nice. One of Dad's? He held up an ornate belt buckle in silver and copper filigree. Tamoth smiled proudly. No, that's one of mine. You should be able to tell by now, you silly twit. Lalitha needs a new belt. Any family discounts going? Jimmy grinned at Talgith's brother. Don't be a dick, Jimmy. Of course there is. Isn't there, Tamoth? Aye. Any friend of my little brother's a friend of mine. He smiled kindly at Lalitha, who was studying the buckle, admiration clear on her face. Mintalethia, the tanner's wife. We bought the wagon out together. Her stall's a few along. She's got some really nice leather belts there. Tamoth indicated which way we would find her. So, how long are you in town for? Where are you staying? Talgoth asked as Tamoth counted coins and wrapped the buckle for Lalitha. We're having to head back first thing in the morning, I'm afraid. Try and beat the weather back home. But we're staying at the Silver Squirrel. Do you know it? Charlie and Jimmy did. So we agreed to meet up with them later, when the market had finished. Down at Mintalethia's stall, Lalitha picked out a blue leather belt that Jimmy and Charlie inspected and improved of, and that was added to the growing pile in her shopping bag. As the sun passed its zenith, we were both getting hot and tired and hungry. We found a booth that sold freshly baked pies, both meat and fruit, and Charlie bought us all one of each, and we sat around a little table and ate, watching a contortionist put on a show, bending in ways I would have thought impossible for a human being. When we were all replete and dusted with pastry crumbs, we continued wandering round the market. Charlie bought a couple of novels at a second-hand bookseller's, and Talgoth bought a rather ugly green and brown striped scarf from a pretty girl who batted her eyelashes at him. I don't know what I'm going to do with the scarf, he told us as we walked away, but did you see the way she looked at me? Totally worth it. We found ourselves wandering back in the direction of the quarter and decided to call it a day. I definitely needed a bath after the dust of the crowded marketplace. When I was clean and dry and dressed in my good new robe, I went out the hallway to see what everyone was up to, and was almost bowled over by Lalitha running past me. I caught a glimpse of her blotchy and tear-streaked face before she barreled into her room and slammed the door. Seconds later, Jimmy rushed down the stairs after her. "Letha, darling, I'm sure she didn't mean—" "Bugger off, Jimmy!" she screamed from behind the closed door. I looked at him to see what the matter was. He shrugged and mouthed "Stella" at me. We could hear steps on the stairs and Stella's voice complaining. "I didn't say anything, Emma. I don't know why—" She stopped when she saw me and Jimmy standing there. "Sod off, Jesseth. This is none of your business." She pushed past me and stalked down to her room. Emma followed, giving Jimmy a knowing look, and I retreated through the door to my own quarters. Through the wall I could hear Lalitha sobbing and the thumps of hard objects being hurled at the wall. "No, Jimmy," I said. "Leave me alone," I heard her yell at her mentor. Oh, hell. Maybe I should do something. The thumping grew more vigorous, and I made up my mind. Back out in the hall, Jimmy was slumped against the wall outside her door. I'd remembered something Charlie had told me once about girls. Something about not letting them rage alone because it only made things worse. Well, now was as good a time as any to try that theory out. And Jimmy looked up at me and I squared my shoulders and he whispered, "Good luck," as I turned the handle on the door. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said. "Leave me alone." A book thumped against the half-open door. "Fucking hell, Jimmy, I swear—" She stopped shouting briefly as I quickly ducked inside and shut the door behind me. "Go away, Jesseth," she muttered, her back turned. Okay, deep breaths. "You can do this," I told myself. The room was a mess. She had pulled most of the books from her bookcase and they were lying open on a pile on the floor. I walked over, spun her round and hugged her fiercely as she struggled and beat at me ineffectually with her tiny fists, howling with rage. "It's not fair," she cried when she had calmed down a little. "She's such a bitch. An effing bloody bitch. I can't even have one nice day with my friends without—" And her voice cracked as she leaned into my shoulder and wept. It's just not fair. She's always got everything she's ever wanted. Including you." She pulled back and glared at me with red-rimmed eyes. "But that's not enough. She's evil, Jazz. Pure effing evil." "What did she say, Letha?" She said, I... Oh. And she fell to weeping again. I kept holding her and stroking her hair awkwardly. Girls crying made me highly uncomfortable, but at least she wasn't throwing things anymore. She finally stopped sobbing and extracted herself from my arms. Ugh, I bet I look disgusting. I hope I haven't got too much snot on your nice robe. Hang on. She went into her bathroom and blew her nose loudly. Just as she emerged, there was a knock on the door. Lalitha? It was Emma. May we please come in and talk to you? Lalitha looked at me miserably and I shrugged. Fine, whatever. Come in. Emma entered, leading a pale, red-eyed Sella. Lalitha? Sella whispered, her eyes on the floor. I'm sorry. I really am. I've been a cat, and I didn't know, and now I do, and I'm really sorry. She rushed through her words, and then turned and fled from the room, her eyes leaking fresh tears. Lalitha and I stared at Emma, open-mouthed. Is it safe to come in? Jimmy stuck his head round the door, and seeing that the books had ceased to fly, came in and gave Lalitha a hug. What did you say to her? I asked Emma, almost unable to believe the transformation in Sella. Emma shrugged. I didn't say anything. I just showed her what it feels like, is all. You mean with Yavin? Lalitha stared at the Nyathi woman accusingly, and Emma nodded. Oh. It's an old mentoring trick, Jimmy explained to his Bloodkin hesitantly. Kind of like psychotherapy, but, well, the opposite. Emma released the chemicals in Sella's brain that produces the same kinds of feelings that her words do to you. It's something of a last resort, but I think she understands now. She's not a bad girl. Lalitha snorted, but Emma continued firmly. She's just a bit self-involved. I couldn't help myself. A bit. And Jimmy elbowed me. Anyway, she now understands the consequences of her careless words. I expect she'll be more thoughtful in the future. Lalitha sniffed and surprised us all. Will she be okay? Emma smiled at her. She'll be fine. She'll probably cry herself to sleep. The neural chemicals will dissipate and her emotional balance will be back to normal by tomorrow. She turned to leave. Emma, Lalitha called, and she turned in the doorway. Thanks. Emma grinned. That's what I'm here for. It didn't take long for Lalitha to have a bath and tidy herself up. I offered to help Jimmy sort out the mess in their room, but he laughed and told me that it was a mentor's job, so I left him to it and went to find Charlie. Up in the common room, I told him what Emma had said, and he nodded thoughtfully. I thought she might, yeah. Really? Would you ever do that to me? He looked a bit startled. Well, I mean, I suppose I would, if I really had to, of course, but it's you we're talking about, JJ. I hardly think you'd ever need it. Okay. I bet Sella didn't think she needed it. Yeah, well, that's exactly why she did. She was pretty cruel, and girls can be, well, sensitive. But you're self-contained, Jazz, but never self-centered. I've seen that. You did a bloody nice thing back there, going and looking after her. It didn't seem like much of a thing at the time. I just hadn't wanted Letha to completely destroy her room, and I told Charlie as much. To my chagrin, he laughed. See, you're a good kid and you don't even realise it. It's very refreshing. Aren't I lucky to have such a good Bloodkin? And he grabbed me in one of his unbreakable headlocks and ground his knuckles into my skull. Ow! Sod off, you big elephant! I'll be not nice if you're not careful. He laughed again as he let me go, and I staggered back, slightly out of breath. I'd just like to see you try. As predicted, Sella was asleep when we left to meet up with Talga's brother. Emma stayed with her Bloodkin, but everybody else came with us, keen to continue the day's festivities. The sky was already dark when we departed, and there was a definite bite to the air. None of us humans had ever been to a tavern in the human area of the city before, and as soon as we left the quarter, I was hopelessly lost. Luckily, the mentors knew where we were going, and eventually the streets, wider than in the Neathi quarter, but equally twisty, led us to an area of the merchants' quarter in the east of the city, past the bridge to the castle. We could hear the tavern before we saw it, music and loud shouts of laughter drifting out onto the streets. We rounded a corner, and there it was, the Silver Squirrel, its painted board illuminated by light spilling from the open door. Inside, the air was thick and acrid with candle and tobacco smoke and the stink of spilled ale, even though it was still early and the evening's revelry only just starting to get going. We found Tamoth perched by the bar, sipping a glass of wine. "Sweet little bitch, Geth. Bring the entire hall with you?" Talbot grinned. "Almost. Have you eaten yet?" "No, I thought I'd wait for you lot. Shall we find a table?" We secured a large booth by the fire and dragged over some extra chairs so we could all sit, although it was a bit snug. The waitress brought over plates of stew and loaves of fragrant and crunchy garlic bread, as well as bottles of wine and pitchers of ale. We tucked into our meals as Tamoth and Talgith gossiped about folk from back home. I knew most of the people they spoke of, but felt curiously removed. Jail's head seemed like 1,000,000 miles away. Not long after we had finished mopping up the last of the stew with the bread, the band started playing. The music was as different from the music in the Shivering Thistle as the tavern itself. In the quarter, our group would have gone unremarked, but here we were eyed a bit suspiciously by some of the pub's patrons. The band itself was a group of 7 musicians, playing an assortment of guitars, drums, fiddles, and an accordion. While the music at the Thistle was serene and beautiful, here it was loud, frenzied, and perfect for dancing. I regretted the absence of Sella only briefly, as Lilitha pulled me up to dance, but it wasn't long before Talgith grabbed her off me and dragged her round in a mad waltz. A pretty girl with bouncing curly brown hair and a daringly low-cut dress clutched at my hand and spun me around, but then was off, dancing with someone else before I could even ask her name. The night passed in a blur of wine and song and pretty girls, but realistically, the nauseating stink of tobacco smoke and the odd look the mentors were receiving made me glad when we decided to head home. Talgith was furiously kissing a girl in the corner and was less impressed to be pulled away. "She was not a prostitute," he replied hotly to Lilitha's ribbing. Outside, our breath made little puffs in the air and the stars shone down coldly. The streets were full of laughing groups, making their ways between parties or stumbling home after imbibing too much. We made our way back to the hall slowly, and our group spread out a bit on the rather long walk. Richard and James zoomed up front, giving their Bloodkin piggyback rides, hooting with laughter. Lilitha and I brought up the rear. "Oh, bollocks. Hold on a second, Jazz." She grabbed my shoulder to steady herself as she pulled off one of her shoes to fish out a stone that had become caught. "Hey, thanks for this afternoon, eh?" she told me. "Not a problem, Letha. Charlie told me once how to handle girls who were, crazy." I laughed. "Yeah, a bit crazy." She laughed with me, relaxed now as we resumed our walk. Suddenly, out of an alleyway, 2 men stepped in front of us. I thought it was a bit odd, but Lilitha, presumably accustomed to unwanted male attention, simply held her head high and tried to walk past them. "These them?" I heard one of the men mutter to the other as we drew up. "Yep." And then they jumped on us, covering our mouths and pulling us back into the alley. None of the rest of our group up ahead noticed, and I tried to call out, but the man who grabbed me stuffed a filthy rag into my mouth before I could make a noise. Lilitha was struggling in the grips of the other man and managed to get in a good kick to his bollocks. He yelped but still held her firmly, pushing her further away from the main street. In the darkness in the back alley, I could barely make out what they were doing. The one that held Lilitha grabbed a fistful of her hair and forced her head back. "Dirty little bitch," he muttered, his voice dripping with spite and fury, and he slapped her hard around the face with the back of his hand. I was truly shocked, not just because the scum had just backhanded my friend like she was some common whore, but Lilbitch was a curse that had the dubious distinction of being both misogynistic and sacrilegious, and was never, ever spoken in polite company. Which clearly this was not. I thought they were going to rob us. But the thug holding me twisted my arms up behind me and forced me down to my knees. "So she'll do?" he asked the one holding Lalitha, who was still struggling in vain. "Yep, looks like it." "What about this one?" I realised he meant me. "He's too fair, you'd be able to tell." "So what shall I do with him then?" "Ow! Cunst!" Lalitha had managed to get an elbow into her assailant's windpipe. He jerked her head with his fistful of her hair, and she dropped down to her knees as well, gurgling in pain. "I don't know. Kill him, I suppose." "Oh, shit. Oh, holy shit. This was not a robbery. This was... Oh, shit." The guy behind me had pulled out a long hunting knife, wickedly sharp, and I could see it gleaming faintly out of the corner of my eye. The man holding Lalitha bent his head to hers, and she snarled at him. "Say goodbye to your friend, girlie." The man with the knife held it up to my throat. I was going to die. Just like that. Sweet little bitch. I was going to die. I closed my eyes as I felt him tense to draw it across my throat. Then... nothing. I was dead, clearly. There was no pain. No, nothing. I couldn't feel the man or the knife against my throat anymore. I was dead, and this was some kind of afterlife. Then I heard the sound of someone being sick, and I realised I could open my eyes. The two men were lying in heaps on the ground, and Lalitha was throwing up against the wall, one hand out to steady herself. I spat the rag out of my mouth and tried to breathe. Apparently I wasn't dead. But if I wasn't dead, why was it so hard to get air into my lungs? I sucked furiously, trying to get some oxygen past my constricted throat. "Oh, Joseph, look! I threw up on my dinner!" Lalitha called out, sounding a bit giddy. "Oh, Jazz, look!" I was still on my knees, my head down, and I thought she was still talking about vomit. "You were invisible." That was weird. I looked up to where Lalitha was pointing, and there was another figure, dark against the exit to the alley. "You two alright?" she asked. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't breathe, let alone think. "Anna?" The figure stepped forward and pushed back her hood. It was Anna. What the hell? You killed them?" Lalitha gasped out, still propped against the wall. Anna nodded. "Aneurysms." Oh, that's very impressive." Lalitha had started giggling and pushed off from the wall, tottering over. Oh, Jazz, we got rescued. And, oh my, we got rescued by La Min. We got rescued by La Massalian. "Lalitha," I warned her feebly. How did she know? She waved at the air and almost stumbled. It's not like it's hard to tell. With all the bodyguards. She swung around wildly and pointed at me. "And your mentor's in love with La Min." I groaned and tried to stand on wobbly legs. This really was too much. Lalitha's stumbling had brought her right up to Anna, who was watching, violet eyes inscrutable. That invisibility thing was brilliant. "Do you think you could teach me?" She grasped at Anna's sleeve, swaying wildly. "Oh, Anna, you're so pretty." Anna caught her easily as she fainted dead away. Hi, Anna." I had managed to walk the few steps to where she was holding Lalitha upright. What the hell was that?" "Sorry I didn't get here sooner, Joseph. But But those men! She smiled thinly. I have had my eye on them for some time. It's personal. Gosh. I couldn't really think of anything else to say. Will you be all right with her? Anna indicated the unconscious Lalitha and I nodded, speechless. Anna transferred Lalitha to me and I slung one of her arms around my shoulder. Good. Get back to the others now. And no lagging behind, you hear? Oh, and Jasseth, we will keep this incident quiet, yes? Sure. Good. She nodded and stepped back into the shadows, then was simply not there anymore. Sweet holy lil bitch. Seriously? Letha? Wake up! I tapped her on the face and she stirred. Come on, can you walk? Let's start walking. I half dragged her out of the alley back onto the street. Oof, shit, Jazz, what just... Oh, God! I was too shaken to even reply. Lalitha started to move her legs by herself, but she still leaned heavily on me. Oh, shit. I told Anna she was pretty. Seriously. I had almost been murdered, and that was what she was worried about? Fucking hell, Jazz. You almost got murdered. I could hear the catch in her voice, and she gave a little gasp that could have been a sob. Murdered? Then she giggled. Oh, bollocks. She was hysterical. Yep. I almost got murdered. Oh no, I could feel it coming. By two thugs in a dark alleyway. Yep. Almost got murdered in a dark alleyway. Shit, I couldn't help it. I giggled too. It was almost too ridiculous to be true. Murdered in a dark alleyway, she repeated and then couldn't hold it in any longer. What an effing loser! She collapsed in hysterical laughter and I had to hold her up. And we were rescued by Lovin herself. I couldn't stop now. I was giggling madly. And she was invisible. And she used magic. We shrieked with laughter. What are you two giggling about? Talgoth asked us grumpily as we found the rest of our group waiting at the next intersection. We thought you'd lost you, called Charlie. Aletha managed to calm herself for a moment and nodded seriously. You almost did. She looked at me out of the corner of her eye, and that was it. We were off, cackling like mad people all the way back to the hall. End of chapter 14! Yay! Yay!